Dean, Fakulti of Medicine, University of Malaya, who will chair today's lecture, and Professor Dr. Christina Phoay, Department of Primary Care Medicine, Faculty of Medicine, University of Malaya.
Universiti Malaya, kebanggaan kita semua, bertambah para ilmuwan di berbagai lapangan. Kami bertekad di hati mencapai cita murni, tradisi kecemerlangan menepati wawasan. Di sini kami sedia berbakti, terus berinovasi. Kami harapkan generasi muda, teras nusa dan bangsa. Varsity kesayanganku, sungguh banyak jasamu membentuk insan mulia, berilmu berbudaya. Di sini kami sedia berbakti, terus berinovasi. Kami harapkan generasi muda, teras nusa dan bangsa. Varsity kesayanganku, sungguh banyak jasamu membentuk insan mulia, berilmu berbudaya.
Please be seated. Yang amat berbahagia Tuan Datuk Sri Hajah Dr. Aisyah Ong, Pro-Chancellor University of Malaya. Yang berbahagia Profesor Datuk Dr. Adibah Kamaruzaman, Dean Faculty of Medicine, University of Malaya. Professor Dr. Christina Phoay, distinguished guests, fellow professors, academicians, and researchers, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the inaugural lecture by Professor Dr. Christina Phoay entitled, What Does It Take to Be a Lifelong Learner? Without further delay, I would like to invite Professor Datuk Dr. Adibah Kamaruzaman to chair this lecture and introduce Professor Dr. Christina Phoay. Please welcome.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum. Tuan Datuk Sri Dr. Hajah Aisyah Ong, Pro-Chancellor Universiti Malaya, fellow colleagues, friends, students, welcome to this afternoon's inaugural lecture. Professor Dr. Christina Phoay is well known to many of you in the faculty as a medical educationist and a primary care physician, and it's therefore my pleasure to introduce her this afternoon. Christina did her medical training in the United Kingdom and returned in 1995 to join the Faculty of Medicine at as a lecturer in the Department of Primary Care Medicine. At that time, the department was still considered a new kid on the block, and Christina was involved in developing the teaching of communication skills as a niche area in which primary care excelled and still does. The undergraduate medical curriculum was also in the process of changing to the new integrated curriculum, which was started in 1998. And there were a couple of things for this curriculum in which Christina played a key role in establishing and in being the anchor person. The first was as the coordinator of the Community Family Case Studies program in the Doctor, Patient Health and Society module, one of the 3 vertical strands running through the 5-year program. The CFCS, as it's known, required a complex logistical coordination of the whole class of students, the home visits that they had to conduct on allocated patients, and the debriefing sessions in which students regrouped after their home visits to share their findings and experiences with tutors from the basic science departments as well as clinicians. Christina was able to successfully achieve the cooperation from all contributing departments and ran this program with clockwork efficiency. The second notable contribution that Christina made to the NIC was with regards to assessment at exit level in the final year with the establishment of the Objective Structured Clinical Exam, or OSCE, which has now become part and parcel of our everyday life here at the faculty. At the time, she was sent to the US with the late Professor Dr. Rokia Pendek to learn how to train standardized patients to use OSCEs, and when they returned, had to devise this exam from scratch. Again, Christina's organizational skills came in handy, and the OSCEs, which involve around 200 students and examiners from 11 clinical disciplines in 3 to 4 concurrent tracks, were conducted with the efficiency of a military operation, and to this day, it has remained so. Christina and Rokia not only conducted the OSCEs, they also went on to initiate training workshops for the examiners in an effort to help examiners develop appropriate assessment rating skills. This involvement in assessment started the chain reaction that subsequently led her to develop a deeper interest in medical education and her aspiration to pursue it at a higher level. I'm sure Christina will touch upon all this further in her lecture. She has also contributed to the leadership of this faculty as head of primary care medicine from 2004 to 2007, and was the first head of the then newly formed Medical Education Research and Development Unit, better known now as MERDU. She's now been tasked with leading the faculty in its faculty development initiatives in MERDU to provide in-house training for academic staff in their many roles as teachers for both the undergraduate and postgraduate programs. In addition, her coordination and organizational skills are being utilized again in the planning and delivery of a new clinical assessment for the first graduating cohort of the Universiti Malaya medical program, which replaced the new integrated curriculum. Without further ado, I would like to invite Christina to give her inaugural lecture. Christina.
Yang amat berbahagia, Tuan Datuk Sri Haja Dr. Aisha Ong, Pro-Chancellor University of Malaya. Yang berbahagia, Datuk Professor Dr. Adiba Kamarul Zaman, Dean, Faculty of Medicine, University of Malaya. Distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I think traditionally, inaugural lectures are actually done at the beginning of one's appointment as a full professor. And perhaps I should have done that long time ago, but I never got round to it. It was a bit of procrastination and putting things off, as we often do. And I guess it's also, I felt perhaps as if not ready. It's also used, Syarahan Perdanas are also used for the purposes of promotion. And that's not one of the reasons why I decided to do it. I've had enough of promotion. I'm quite happy where I am, so we don't need to deal with that, okay? But I finally decided to do it now because I think I do have something to say. So that's what this is all about. Okay. I also, because there is no prescribed way of doing inaugurals, I thought I would do things differently, and I will start backwards by giving my thank yous. Because without the thank yous and acknowledging everyone who I need to acknowledge, I wouldn't be where I am today. I am truly indebted to a great number of people who I have had the privilege of engaging with in different corners of the world at various times of my life. Some of you planted the seeds of interest in medical education a long time ago, and it's germinated and it's taken firm root. Some of you have helped me in one way or another in my career and also on my doctoral journey of discovery, as mentors, as role models, friends, supporters, colleagues, and family, especially my long-suffering family. Without your guidance and support and understanding, this would not have been possible at all. So to all of you, thank you. This lecture is entitled, What Does It Take to Be a Lifelong Learner? I think my mother is fond of reminding me of the story that when I was very young, I apparently declared that I wanted to be a teacher, to which she replied, teachers have to get up very early in the morning, you know. So at which point, I thought, not a good idea. Don't like to get up early in the morning. See, you do that as a teacher. That's what I remember sometimes of my primary school teachers. So instead of becoming a teacher, I thought, okay, I'll be a doctor instead, which means you never actually go to bed at all. Okay. So, but I didn't realize it at the time. But what has happened is God has been actually very good, and he's allowed me to be both. So as a teacher and a doctor, and this is what this is all about. Lifelong learning is learning throughout life. It's something that we keep telling our students to do. We keep exhorting them, you must be lifelong learners. But how many of us actually would do that? Would do as we say. Learning is very complex. When I went into medical education, it was like going into the dark side. I had to delve into social sciences, the education way of doing things, and reading the style of education papers, which is like, they average about 20 to 30 pages long, whereas you read any clinical summary now or case report, and it's like you'll be lucky if it's half a side. So it was a complete, it was quite difficult in the beginning to understand all the things that were said. So it's like learning a new language, being on a new planet. And there are many theories about learning. There are learning approaches. People talk about styles. They talk about strategies. There's lots in the literature, a lot. And then people talk about adult learning and experiential learning. I mean, these are just two. I haven't put them all down here because, you know, you'll all faint at the sight of it, as I did when I first went in and tried to understand all this. But I think the important thing is for us as teachers to try and understand how do students learn so that we can better help them with whatever it is that they need to master. So I thought what I could do is actually take you on my journey that I've made of lifelong learning, and perhaps if there are things that I can share that others could perhaps make use of, then that would be really great. So, oops, why am I going backwards? What has actually driven my learning? I think 2 years ago, those of you who were here may remember my colleague in primary care medicine, Professor Ng Chek Jen, in his inaugural lecture talked about putting patients back at the heart of care. But his approach was one with regard to giving patients or teaching patients how to make decisions, a shared decision-making process. So it was helping patients from that point of view so that they could take better care of themselves. My approach is also about patients at the heart of care, because as a practicing family physician, they have been very important to me, and they have taught me a lot. And I have invited some of them here today, and I'm also very grateful that they have come to provide me support. But it's without them that I wouldn't be a teacher. So they are very, very important. And as we always say to our students, well, as I always say to my students, patients must come first over everything else. So in order to help patients and put them at the heart of care, we need to have good healthcare professionals, including doctors, who can look after them well. And in order to do that well, they need to be trained well. So it's equally important for teachers to recognize this and to be able to help their students. My early teaching experiences that started in 1995 started with, well, in those days, the high tech was having an overhead projector. Now, I don't know how many of you would ever have seen one of these. I know they belong in the museum. And also, when I started in primary care at that time, WordStar was still around. And I remember Kak Zavia teaching me how to use WordStar. And I couldn't get head or tail of it. So fortunately, Microsoft Office came along fairly quickly. And that was much easier to use. And I didn't have to remember all the control and all things that I had to do. But those were my early teaching experiences. And with the overhead projector, the first lecture I gave was reading somebody else's transparencies, because I hadn't a clue what to do. So I went to the person who gave the lecture before I did and said, look, what do you do? I'm supposed to talk about this topic. And she said, well, just go and fish out the last overhead transparencies that were used, and you put them on the screen, and you just read from them. And in fact, actually, I do remember some lecturers actually making use of the same transparencies year after year after year. Yeah, they weren't really updated. But those were my early experiences, certainly. And I know times have changed now, and things are a lot more high-tech, and there's a lot more digital stuff that you can do. My other early teaching experience was in 2000, when I actually had an international fellowship in medical education. And I have Professor Dr. Anwar Zaini and Professor Sharifah Farida Al-Hadi to thank for this, because they were the ones who pushed me. they pushed me in that direction. And it was like, maybe it was a case of you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, but never mind, go here. There's this slot that you can go to. And it was the best thing I ever did. I had a great time. This is what New Mexico looks like. People in the United States, some of them don't even know that it's part of their country, and they think it's a foreign land and that you need a passport to get to it. But if you do go there, it is a beautiful place, and the people are extremely warm and friendly. And I was based at the University of New Mexico for nearly 6 months. And I worked with Warren Heffron, who was the past chair of family medicine there, and a wonderful, wonderful man. When I went on that fellowship, I had a little stipend which I was paid to help, pay for wherever I was living and to pay for food. And he actually said to me, why don't you keep that money, save it up, then you can go traveling around the US. Come and stay with me instead. And he actually welcomed me into his home, and I became part of the family, and I became the fourth daughter in the family. So that's Warren. And that was my first taste of real mentorship, and I really value it, and I still keep in touch with him. He still goes to the office every now and then. He refuses to sit still. But at New Mexico, I also learned other things like problem-based learning, which was really I think quite new at that time, and perhaps New Mexico was one of the places, apart from McMaster's in Canada, where they really did problem-based learning. So I had a real taste of what was going on in their small group teaching sessions. It was used as a tool to help students learn rather than giving them didactic lectures. And it was really exciting stuff to see these students do their learning. So when I came back, of course we did PBL at UM. But it did take quite a lot because, of course, when you're making changes, not everybody may be in agreement at that time. And some people might feel threatened. Some people may embrace it wholeheartedly because it's something quite fresh. But on the whole, it did take quite a lot of work. And we did have to run training workshops. And then we ended up not only running training workshops in this faculty, but we ended up spreading like a virus to dental and computer science and technology. We even went to education. And now that I look back, the thought that I was going with my partners in crime, Prof. Noor Azila Muhammad Adnan and Dr. Deborah Sim, to actually tell the educationists, this is the way you do PBL, was actually incredibly daring, and I don't know how we got away with it. And if I had to do this again, I definitely wouldn't do it. I'd chicken out immediately. All right, but we just went in gung-ho because we had the enthusiasm. We may not have had the theoretical backing, but we certainly had the enthusiasm at the time. So the three of us, I think we became known as the three blind mice. Because we were sort of running around in circles, see how they run, see how they run. And I'm not sure we really knew what we were doing, but we just did it. And we'd organize our training workshops, and then we'd cajole people to come and have training and get all the higher heads of department to get their staff to come as well. But I'm not sure we knew what we were doing. So, three blind mice. Anyway, I've got one sister mouse sitting there, and I'm not sure where the other sister mouse is. Deborah, are you? No, maybe not. Okay, so that was problem-based learning. So that was another thing that we started off, and it still does go on in UM. And Deborah is still very faithful to conducting the workshops, and she certainly spread the word in those days for the new integrated curriculum. Okay, I'm sorry about the quality of the slides. They are mine, and I don't feature in many of my slides because I'm the one taking the pictures, which is a good thing. Okay, so the other thing that I did in my early days in the faculty was, as Prof. Adiba has mentioned, the OSCE, the Objective Structured Clinical Exams. and these were for the final year medical students. And they started in 2003. So after Rokia and I went off to Southern Illinois University to learn how to train standardized patients, we came back. We had wonderful, brand new, purpose-built almost exam wards. Thanks to Tan Sri, Prof. Amin, we got to use them first. But setting up this exam was quite daunting because it did require 16 stations from 11 clinical departments. And there was not only the training of standardized patients, but there was also the setting up of equipment and getting the involvement of the skills lab as well. So lots of work, but lots of new experiences, lots of things to learn there as well. And these are just some illustrations of the early stations that we had. For those of you students sitting in the audience, if you think I'm going to tell you any questions for forthcoming OSCEs, you're in the wrong lecture hall. Okay, no such luck. Okay, we've come a long way from doing these stations, but these were the early ones that we had. Yes, some of you may recognize yourselves. Okay, so Rokia and I were the partners in crime, and at that time in the Dean's office we had Puan Rosnani Abdul Aziz on the left and also Puan Susanna Abdullah to help us. So that was the OSCE team. And then in 2005 I had a further international fellowship in Philadelphia this time, and that was with FAMA, Foundation for the Advancement of International Medical Education and Research. And that has been actually a real life changer for me, not only in terms of stepping more into the dark side of medical education, but it actually sort of put me on the path that I subsequently took. So what was this FAMA all about? Well, it was a 2-year, and it was Prof. Azila who started it because she went first in 2003, and then she came back and shoved me and said, you go next. So it's like, okay, put in application, don't know what it's all about, but go. Ikut arahan. This FAMA fellowship is a 2-year fellowship. And what they do is the money that comes from all the exam fees from Education Commission for Foreign Medical Graduates. So those of you who happen to want to go to US and want to work there as a doctor, you all have to take that exam, that standard exam. So the fees that was collected, some surplus, is actually channeled into medical education. And they formed this institute, this FAMA. And what they did was they actually every year, they select about 16, 18 fellows from around the world. So the competition is quite stiff. It's more than usually about 100 and 150 applications for just 16 places. But you're selected. You have a project that you are helped with to develop. And then there are 2 residential sessions of about 2 to 3 weeks each. So at the start of the program, then you go back to your host nation, you run whatever your project is, then you come back the following year and you report it. And then the program does run on for another year, long distance. So I went to, the City of Love, is it? Is that what it's called? Anyway, it's the one that's got the Liberty Bell in it, and who else? There's Benjamin Franklin, who made himself famous by standing somewhere with a key and waiting for lightning to strike him. That all happened in Philadelphia. And at the FAMA Institute in 2005, these were the people from other countries who were in my cohort. So from Uganda, from Pakistan, from South Africa, from Nepal, from Nigeria, from Chile. So pretty diverse bunch. And we thought we didn't have anything in common, but the one thing that we were all very passionate about was medical education. So it was a real bonding experience because it was an in-house. You stayed in, you ate together, you had your own rooms, but you worked together and you had to work. You had to work really, really hard. So this is my group. Yes, our group. And these people in the back left corner will feature again later, because this was the bunch of South Africans who led me astray. Okay, so just, yeah, they'll come back to appear again. But there was Tara from Pakistan. This is Paige, who was one of the directors. There's Somia from Nepal. There was Esther and Mila from Philippines. Fanta from Ethiopia. I think this is Esther also. I can't remember her name, but she was from Nigeria. Elsie from Uganda. That's me. That's Rita from India and Ricardo from Chile. And Elsie will also feature later in my life. Okay, but that's what happened. It was networking at its best. And that's the way you get to put out your network tentacles. So yeah, here, some more partners in crime. So there was David and there was Yonita. And David was from Pretoria on the east side of South Africa, and Yonita was from Stellenbosch in Cape Town. So the following year, when I went back in 2006, there was an opportunity for a little bit of social, social activity. And those of you who are familiar with the movies Rocky, these are the steps of the Philadelphia Art Museum that he ran all the way up and, went hooray or whatever it is. But yes, we actually managed to get there as well. So in that year, what happens is there's an overlap of the incoming year. And in the incoming 2006 year, there was Professor Jamuna, who was there. There she is. And she features there as well, but I'm sorry if it's a bit dark and you can't see. So she had her own cohort, and we had our own cohort. And there was this bit of overlap, and that was the way of passing on kind of information, sharing your networking as well. So at the 2006 Institute, I had to present the project which I had developed with the aid of FAMA. And this was my project. And it doesn't look like a poster, but I sort of made it into a unique way of a different kind of poster presentation, because I had to travel all that way. I didn't want to bring a rolled up poster. So I thought, I will print it on A4, laminate it, and then set it up like a poster. Nobody said anything, so it must have been all right, actually. So those of you who have to do posters, perhaps bear this in mind. But anyway, I presented my work there, which was actually developing a way of OSCE training for examiners. Because Roki and I then realized, once we started the OSCE exams, that we were noticing examiners do lots of things which they shouldn't do. And there wasn't very much standardization to what they were doing. So if you were running 3 simultaneous tracks of OSCE at the same time, running so that the 3 students in 3 different tracks, and if 3 examiners are doing different things, there might be a bit of a problem. So we had to start some kind of examiner training. So this was my training. This is a game plan which they taught me how to set it up and who I had to go and identify as the people who I had to go and talk to in order to make this plan succeed. So that was all part of FAMA and its training that it provided. And lo and behold, I came back and started running examiner training with Rokia. So some more youthful faces there. That one. Okay. So we used to run it out in the skills lab, but we also made use of 2-way mirror facilities that we had. So we shared the PBL rooms, actually, that were in use at the time. And we put examiners through their paces. So we simulated stations. We actually got some really nice students to volunteer. Students volunteering for work, especially exams, well, I don't know, maybe they thought that we would give them hints. Maybe they wanted the practice, which they got because we did provide feedback, but it was meant to be a win-win situation and to help us. So, for example, in the station on the left, he's got to pass a nasogastric tube, and on the right-hand side, it's measuring baby's head circumference. And in a separate room on the other side of the mirrors, the other participants in the workshop would be watching through the mirror. So they could actually also mark the student on the same exam mark sheet as what the examiner inside the station was using. So that way you could get more than one examiner marking the same student, and then you compare their marks. And it was interesting to see what, they were ranging from either passing the student to failing them. And sometimes when we asked, why did you give this mark? The student didn't do anything. They couldn't do the station at all, such as normal delivery through a pelvis. They couldn't describe the steps because they hadn't done obs and gynae posting at the time. Well, examiners told us, I gave him a kasian mark, charity mark. Okay, so we thought, no, you can't do this. So the training was really try and standardize examiner behavior and make them have an understanding of the process of examination. So we tested, as in the previous slide, examiners in their own disciplines, testing a station in their own disciplines, but we also put them out of their comfort zones and made them do somebody else's discipline as well. So here we've got Dr. Norman Dublin, who's actually doing the head circumference, a pediatric station. And we've got an ophthalmologist here who's doing the mannequin doll going through the pelvis. Okay, but that's what we did. And we actually established it so that everyone, all academic staff who were going to be OSCE examiners had to go through training. And I'm indebted to the dean at the time, maybe it was Tan Sri Prof Amin as well, who just said, everybody must do. So it always helps when you have the support of management that way. So that was my team in 2007. It had expanded because we discovered that trying to look after 200 students and maybe up to 60 examiners and the 3 or 4 concurrent tracks of stations and equipment and standardized patients and so forth was becoming a real handful. So we needed to get more people on board. So we went out and nabbed passing people in the corridor. No, actually we identified them and we got them on board. Okay, so Prof. Young Farida came on board, and by 2009 we also had Prof. Anusha. So Prof. Anusha has now taken over the OSCE training and the OSCE exam, conducting it, and she's got her own team in place. Okay, so having done all that, done PBL, done communication skills early on, done OSCE examiner training and running and, all that, I then felt I didn't have the necessary academic backing to what I wanted to do. And I felt I needed, in order to have credibility, I needed to take it a little bit further. So I persuaded UM management to let me go for a master's of philosophy in health professions education. But before that, let me just explain to you, this medical education, why do we need it? Why is it so important? Well, in the bad old days, when you graduated and you were a content expert and you joined the university, it was immediately assumed that you were a teacher. Fine, no problem, you can teach, okay? And the teaching skills, if any, that you needed were often done by observation. So it was you see one happening, then you do it yourself, then you go off and teach the next person along the line. And I think quite often, perhaps more in clinical medicine, it still goes on. However, there still needs to be maybe some educational basis behind this to help to tweak it a bit and to make it more relevant. So as time passed, it became more evident that there needed to be formal educational training for teachers. And this is something that Professor Ronald Harden from University of Dundee, who many of you may know in medical education circles, came up with. And he said medical teachers have 12 roles. So on a kind of pie chart, he's listed them. And I'm not going to really go through it in detail, but it's just to give you an idea that there's a huge spread of things that you have to do as a teacher. And definitely things like the role modeling, and the planning and being resource developers. Maybe we don't know so much about that as we do as the assessment and the teaching aspects. But they are equally important. So in order to do all these things, I just felt I needed to have a little bit more. And that's where FEMA provided me the kind of stepping stones to the Masters of Philosophy. And I did that in South Africa. So that's where those South Africans came back into the picture, you see. They subtly said, after I went to the FEMA Institute, they subtly said, why don't you come for a holiday and see South Africa for yourself? So I thought, oh yeah, this sounds like a good idea. Never been there. Apartheid is over. It's like, goody, yes, let's do it. And then they were going to show me around, which they did. And then slowly, I sort of got pulled that way. And I ended up choosing South Africa as a place to go for my postgraduate training in medical education because I had to do some homework for the university, first of all, to tell them what the cost was going to be. So it would be prohibitively expensive. It was in those days already to go to well-known places like Dundee in Scotland or Maastricht in Netherlands, or even to Chicago, University of Illinois in Chicago. These were 3 well-known medical education places. Couldn't afford it. But South Africa, wow, that sounded really cheap. Did some calculations. Ooh, I think I can live there. And I'm going to be in the Western Cape, in Stellenbosch in Cape Town. They have a good supply of wine as well. Oops. But, it's like, what was most important is I actually had a network of friends there. I had a social support network to help me there. So those were some of the reasons why I decided, they also speak English. They speak Afrikaans as well, but English is also one of their 16 national languages. So I thought, yeah, I can survive, no problem. Anyway, Afrikaans is not too difficult because it's got a few words from Malay, like dekan, and pisang, and tarik, trek, yeah. So we can get by. So, Cape Town, beautiful Table Mountain. Every morning when I was there, I woke up to this sight of Table Mountain, and it's stunning, and it is still stunning to this day. So that's where I did my Masters of Philosophy. Oh, and at this point, sorry, I've been asked to put in some slides of flora and fauna of Africa, because people maybe don't believe that I really went there. And these are actually all my slides, my own pictures. So I didn't take these off the internet, let me tell you. And I really did see them. But I didn't go to Kruger National Park at all. You don't need to go there to see this. So there's this, and there are beautiful birds there. This is called a secretary bird, and that's an ostrich. And this is called a mouse bird, believe it or not. Anyway, what that Masters of Philosophy did was, it then was the next stepping stone to doing my PhD. It seemed a logical sequence, having done the Masters, to go on to a doctoral level. So I did that, and as part of my doctoral study, which was on assessment of final year medical students and clinical competence, I actually had to do the study in 3 African countries in order to get data from 3 sites. So there was South Africa, then there was Botswana, and this is the medical school of the University of Botswana, and this is on their campus. And then I also went to Uganda, to Makerere University. And the choice of these places, again, is, well, like what everybody says, purposively done. because they were English speaking. I also had a network of friends. All my famous friends were there. So Elsie from Uganda helped me in Uganda, and the Botswanans also helped me. And at the time I was doing my studies there, Ebola was happening in West Africa. So of course, don't go to West Africa. Stay in East Africa or stay in Southern Africa. It's fine, you know. So those were some of the pragmatic reasons for choosing these places for my study. But the universities were also very welcoming and being very generous in allowing me to go and study their exit level assessment. So you can imagine what it's like. Somebody from an outsider is coming and scrutinizing your assessment, and then, you know, may come back and say things which you may not necessarily want to hear. But they were very open about it. So that's how I did my study. And that's the title of the study, Investigation into Exit Level Assessment of Clinical Competence of Medical Graduates for the Sub-Saharan African Context. Absolute mouthful. But what it is we're talking about whether the assessment that is done at exit level is appropriate for the context that those graduates are going to work in. And the similar principles can be applied equally to this context. So if we're testing students on maybe subject matter which is not relevant or that they are not going to see, then your curriculum isn't really working very well. Okay, and one way of measuring whether it is appropriate is to use tools that can give you an idea of what diseases and health disease conditions actually exist in your setting. So if you just go into World Health Organization and you use their data, you know, they produce tables and tables and tables of statistics. I will give you, the top 100 diseases that's occurring in Botswana, that's occurring in Malaysia, that's occurring in China. So make use of that information, and perhaps, the assessment material needs to be customized to that, and therefore the teaching needs to be customized to that. But the other things that came out of it was that faculty development is really, really important. And examiners sometimes don't really know how to examine. They think they do, but they don't. So this kind of assessment illiteracy also needs to be addressed in terms of faculty development. So my latest partner in crime, Prof. Vinod Palath from Merdu, and I are busy putting in place faculty development workshops to try and cover not only assessment, but the curriculum and also professionalism. Because, those are the things, if we expect our students to do all those things well, then we need to know about it as well. Okay. Oh, this just shows you, this is just from my studies, showing this blue ring indicates all the people that are involved in that particular community, from the students to graduate doctors who go out into the health workforce to serve the population of the community, and the faculty, the academic staff who teach the students are also from that same community. So when you have a medical school and what they're doing is they're trying to produce students, trying to train students to produce doctors on graduation, it involves teaching and assessment. And you need to look at both methods and content for these, because you want to make sure that your graduates are competent, fit for purpose, can look after the health of the community. And the other thing is the faculty, the academic staff, and the population actually have an influence on the curriculum that is taught. So that needs to be taken into account. So those are things that came out of my PhD. So what have I learned from this? I've learned lots about teaching. I still do. I still learn a lot when I am teaching, and how to do assessment. One of the things I actually learned a lot about during my PhD, and perhaps I should have done it earlier, but I think it wasn't until I became a student again myself that this came in, and it was reflection. It's being able to reflect on how you do. I've always enjoyed running clinics with patients, and at the end of a clinic, it's always a very rewarding to feel, you've sent somebody out who you hope you're looking after them well, and that they do come to see you time and time again. I've got some long-standing patients who have been with me ever since I've been in this faculty. Even when I went away to South Africa for about 5 years, and I sort of distributed them. And then as soon as they found out I was back, it was like, they're back. They somehow found out. It's a pleasure seeing them every time. And the most important is the way I give feedback. I've been made acutely aware of it, especially in terms of doing this PhD. So it's something that's been of value to me, and I hope I can pass on how to give feedback. Other things that I've learned along the way, I guess, is if you really believe in something and you want to do something very strongly, have the drive, have the determination to do it. When I actually applied for leave at the time to go off and do this PhD, and by that time I didn't qualify, shall I say, for any scholarship, way past shelf life. One of the questions I was asked was, how old are you? And it's like, okay, not that young, but if you still have the drive and you still want to learn, then just do it. Do it, if that's really what you believe in, and have a focus. And one of the hardest things maybe has been focusing and trying to finish. Yes, there's always a lot of procrastination going on. Those of you who have completed a PhD and those of you who are going through it, you know what I'm talking about. You know what it's like when somebody comes along and tells you, yeah, you should be writing 500 words a day. And you're going, you just notice some specks of dirt and you have to go and clean the curtains again, and you have to go and do something else and send the car for servicing, etc., etc., etc. Anything to do except writing. Yeah, I did that too. And it is very, very hard, but I think you just got to focus on the final goal, that you can do it and you will do it. I actually never believed I would do it. I think the very last 1 month before the submission date, was extremely stressful. And there's nothing like 3 days before submission date when you're, that 1 month before submission date, I thought I had completed the PhD, and I handed everything back to my 2 supervisors and said, done and dusted. And it came back with about 650 track changes in 6 chapters. And I've never felt more depressed, actually. That was serious depression at that time. But if you want to get through, you just got to do it. So it's like grit your teeth and just do every single track change. And if you can't do the track change, if there's something you don't agree with, then leave it and delete the track change. But be ready to defend your stand. Okay. You must be able to put your hand on your hips when you face your examiners in the oral defense and be able to say why you chose that path. And that's it. And then you're done. You're made. Okay, so you need to have real passion. Okay, so just a last few words about the curriculum. This is what our curriculum normally looks like. Yes, it's stuffed full, and every single discipline really wants to have a share of it. And I think in the current Universiti Malaya medical program, the undergraduate program, this is the formal curriculum, and the transverse it's running in strands, vertical strands that run through it as well. There's stages, and there are themes, and there are domains, and I still don't understand it completely, but there you go. But are there other curricula? And I think there are, and this is also what I found out. So there's something called the intended curriculum, curriculum in action, and learned curriculum. Intended curriculum is what curriculum designers make. Curriculum in action is what the teachers teach, and learned curriculum is what students learn. And as we well know, especially with students, I think quite often it's a case of actually what is the bare minimum that I need to know in order to get through. And that's how it works. So it's a bit of playing games, we all know, okay? But there are different curriculums, and sometimes there is overlap, and sometimes there isn't, between the three different areas. There's also formal, informal, and hidden curriculum. Hidden curriculum. So formal is what is explicitly stated, like what there is up front in your curriculum. Informal curriculum is something that is often used in the clinical setting. It's not so much textbook-based, but it's certainly intentional teaching. Maybe you're learning as an apprentice by watching, observing somebody who's qualified perform a task. But so it's done in a kind of informal way, but it's intentional. And then there's this hidden curriculum, which is often implicit. So it's often unspoken and understood. And for me, actually, doing this inaugural lecture has been a bit like hidden curriculum, because I didn't have a clue what I was supposed to do. And then, what kind of homework is there? If you go and try and Google inaugural lectures, all you'll get is the President of the United States of America. Every 5 years when they change, and then at their inauguration, they're talking about what policies they're going to set forth for the next 5 years. Well, I'm not doing anything of the sort, but there isn't anything else. You can go to YouTube. I understand this lecture is going to be on YouTube for posterity. And you can go and Google and see what other people do. My colleagues over at our sister university, Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, tell me that their inaugural lectures are extremely dead serious. They're really, 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 really serious. Okay, in which case I wouldn't have a hope there, so maybe I'll stay in UM then. Okay, so often there are things that we learn implicitly that nobody tells you about, and somehow you have to gain it. But ideally, what we should do is have the hidden curriculum go more into an informal, so that it becomes out in the open and actually people can tell you what it's all about, even if it's not actually written down in textbooks. So I think I've come to the end of what I want to say. That's about all I really want to say. Thank you. And this is something that also guided me, and also this comes from Azila, because she introduced me to this saying a long time ago. If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. But if you teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. And I think that's what we as teachers should be doing. We should be constantly learning as we're going along. It is lifelong learning. And that's something that we should perhaps impart also to our students. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call Dato' Adiba back again to the stage to summarize and conclude today's inaugural lecture.
Thank you very much, Christina. I have no doubt you chose Stellenbosch for those safaris and the wine. I myself was just there about 4 weeks ago. Ladies and gentlemen, I think essentially what Christina has shared with you this afternoon is also the evolution of medical education, not just here, not just for self and here at UM, but also globally. I came from learning medicine through the see one, do one, teach one style, and many of us here in the auditorium went through that. And in a sense, medical education here at the faculty has always had to take a back seat to the clinical services. Not surprising, given that we have 1 million patients to look after. In the last 5 to 6 years, the number of patients has essentially doubled at PPUM, and it's always a struggle getting people to pay as much attention to medical education as it is to providing the best care. But as Christina said at the outset, everything we do, it has to be with the patient at the heart of it all, whether it's the day-to-day delivering of clinical services, the medical education, as well as the research that we do. So here at the faculty, we're really fortunate to have people who, like Christina, who have chosen medical education as front and central of what they do. As you saw from some of those photos of the PBL sessions, not everyone's excited about being trained in PBL. It used to be quite a dirty word in the first few years of introducing PBL to the faculty, but now it's become second nature to most of us. So, and thanks to people like Christina, who broke new grounds in a sense 20 years ago, bringing new in inverted commas teaching concepts like PBL and OSCE's assessments. Yes, that have now become part and parcel of what we do every day. And now she's been tasked from, as you know, it's not just wines and roses and and beautiful animals in South Africa. She's also brought back some new knowledge to share with us, and she's now been tasked with the team at Merdu to help develop the rest of the faculty in the new art of delivering medical education to our students, the new art and science of delivering medical education to our students. Because, after all, as the leading medical school in the country, with apologies to Dato' Anwar Zaini, we have to be at the forefront of giving the best to our students, in the hope that they become the best clinicians to deliver the best patient care for the million or so patients that we see throughout the year. So Christina, she has taken on this role, as she alluded to, quite late on in life, and she was a bit worried when she came to see me, like, Prof. Adiba, I'm about to retire. What am I going to do with all this knowledge and PhD that from the PhD that I've gained? Don't worry. I think we have seen what you're capable of together with Merdu in the last 2 years, to get the whip cracking, to get people to come to those workshops on teachings and assessment that you've put up for the rest of the faculty, and we value the new teachings that you're going to bring with us, and the new way of teaching, as opposed to the see one, do one, teach one of the yesteryears. So do not go to UKM. Not only are they too serious, but I think here at UM we have plenty of work for you to do to help us continue to be the leading medical school in the country. So thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Dato' Adiba. Thank you very much for chairing this lecture today, and thank you for Dr. Christina Tan for your fruitful session. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our event for today. I hope you have greatly benefited from today's discussion. Once again, on behalf of the University of Malaya, we thank everyone for your time, and hopefully we'll be able to see each other again in future events. We would now like to invite all our guests to have some refreshments. It will be on the floor above this auditorium at the foyer. And with that, let us close today's event, and I would like to wish everyone a good day. Thank you.
to the shore, but it's so far away. Keep me